Hey guys, what's up? Today we're going to get into a Shaddoll Invoked deck. I've been playing with it a lot, I've been testing it a lot, and I think that it's in a pretty good place. I think that it's meta relevant, I think that it's pretty strong. I hope that you guys appreciate it, I hope that you guys like the build, I hope that it helps you with yours. But first, please like and subscribe to the page so that way I know that I'm doing the right stuff and that I'm helping you guys out, as well as having a good time making the videos. So let's go ahead and jump right into this and I'll show you what I'm cooking up and what I've been working on. What's up everybody? We're here today to go over my Invoked Shaddoll list. Invoked Shaddoll has been very good competitively recently, and I've been working on this build in and out a little bit and working on learning the deck some, and I've really enjoyed playing it. It's a lot of fun. I've grown to learn that I like control decks. I like the interaction that you get from playing control decks and the little bit of a longer game you get from playing control decks. And I'm here today to hopefully share that with you and share my build with you. I was actually working on this with Ghost Oracle. I'm sure that you've seen a couple videos where he's helped me out with some stuff or discussed things with me. And to me, he's kind of my resident expert on Invoked Shaddoll and Dogma Shaddoll and things because he plays those decks a lot. And he helped me with this list. So thanks to him for working with me on this. And let's go ahead and get right into the build. I think the first thing I want to go over is the Invoked portion of this deck because it is pretty generic. It's pretty much the same exact thing you're going to see in every Invoked Shaddoll deck and realistically every Invoked deck, to be honest. So where we're going to start is we're going to start with 3 Alistair. I think that's pretty standard. And 3 Meltdown to get to your Alistair. And then 2 Invocation. I still haven't picked up my second copy. I don't want to pay the $40 that they're going for right now. I got this one for $20 a while ago. So I'm hoping they come back down soon or something. Or I can find a good deal or something on one. But 2 is plenty considering you can search it and recur it a whole bunch of times. And you don't necessarily need to get it into your hand that fast, considering you can get it with all these other cards. Obviously, Meltdown searches Alistair, Alistair searches Invocation, so you're essentially playing 8 Invocation. The odds of you getting into your Invoked engine are very high, and I think these are the right ratios. I think they're the ratios that the game has pretty much, that other people are pretty much playing. I've seen maybe 1 Invocation played. Obviously I only have 1 copy, so like if I were to go play at a tournament, I'd only be able to play 1. And you could play something else instead of that, I guess, but I think 2 is the right ratio, especially for a grindier game. The next part of this I want to get into is the Shaddoll core and the other fusion spells. Now obviously Shaddoll and Invoked go very well together, and they play very well off of each other. And Invocation being a generic fusion spell, not just for invoked monsters, really helps you with some of your plays as well if you need to get out a Shaddoll fusion monster or something. But I'll go over the Shaddoll lineup here and the fusion spell lineup and hopefully clear up some things about my ratios. First of all, I play 2 Windy. Obviously the dump for your combo, so that way you can special summon back a monster. Plus it's a wind, which helps you get into Regen, which we'll get into in a minute. Very good card. Must play at least 2. Have played 3 in the past, but I don't feel like the third one comes up super often, especially since you can recur cards from the graveyard pretty reasonably with this deck too. Anyway, 2 Squamata, same thought process on the ratio. I've played 3. The third one doesn't really come up. If I'm playing a pure Shaddoll variant, I definitely play Windy at 3, and I definitely play Squamata at 3. But for the Invoked variant, I feel like you want to make that space for your Invoked cards and for your other cards rather than the extra Windy or Squamata. Also 2 Hedgehog. Same logic there. The effects are just too good not to play those cards at 2. Same reasoning though for not playing them at 3. And then we have 3 one-ofs. We have Aerial, we have Beast, and we have Dragon. Aerial, honestly, it comes up enough that you could potentially play Aerial at 2. The thing with playing Aerial at 2 is if you see it in your hand, it's not great. You're not really looking for waters. And like you're usually trying to use Aerial to flip, get back banished cards, or banish your opponent's cards from the graveyard, essentially like a DD Crow. So, having the extra one could potentially be helpful, especially if you're stuck on something until you see Aerial. But I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a key piece to see in your hand, since you can get into it with your other cards, which is why I found myself only playing one. I feel like I don't feel stuck only playing one. But I could understand why some people may say they played it 2 or they want to play it at 2. So going on here, we'll jump to the Shaddoll traps, and we have Shaddoll Schism and Shaddoll Incarnation. I was lucky and got Schism when it was about $8 instead of $40 or whatever it's at now. But if you're going to play this deck, Schism is definitely a must-have. The deck is so much stronger with Schism, being able to summon cards on your opponent's turns and things like that. It's just such a powerful card. You can't play this deck without it. Even a pure Shaddoll build, I wouldn't play without Schism. But I understand that it's kind of pricey at the same time. So if you're looking for like a more budget version of the deck, don't cut Schism. Don't cut Schism for money. The deck's already pretty cheap since it came in a structure deck. So picking up the one copy of Schism isn't that big of a deal. As far as Incarnation goes, you only need the one. Same idea with the Aerial. You're only going to use the Aerial Incarnation little loop probably once, and if you realistically you could get the cards back off contract or Windy or whatever, and use them again if you really needed to. But having multiples ends up kind of being bricky, because you're looking for your other card, you're looking for your fusion card, you're looking for your Invoked engine, and if you draw into an Aerial or 2 Incarnation or something like that, it's not a great hand. So keeping them at 1 kind of prevents you from seeing cards that you don't want to see. So now I'll get into the fusion spells. To me, this is one of the most important parts of the video. So I'll just jump right in here. We played 2 El Shaddoll Fusion. Great card, quick play spell. So again, you can chain it and play it on your opponent's turn and get out your Windy on your opponent's turn. You can also get that card, get El Shaddoll Fusion back when you do your construct loop. So, I would say that it's mandatory at 2. I've seen people play it at 3, but I'll kind of go into why I don't play it at 3 here in a second. Play 3 Shaddoll Fusion, because especially if you're going second, Shaddoll Fusion is just crazy strong. Almost, I don't know of any deck that doesn't play an extra deck right now in the meta. So your opponent more than most likely will have extra deck monsters special summoned to their side of the field. So that means that you can fusion summon from your deck, which is just insane. And on top of that, it's just one of the best fusion cards in the game. You're not going to play Shaddolls and not play 3 Shaddoll Fusion. You want to see that card in your hand. You want to be able to get to that card later in the grind game as well. So you don't want just 2, and you want to make sure that you can get to that card, which I'll get to later when we get to the extra deck too. I have a little thing there as well. And then the last cards is I played 3 Super Poly. The thing with Super Poly is that if you're not playing Super Poly targets or the meta shifts, like right now, Super Poly is actually pretty good because Dragon Link plays mostly lights and darks. Trying to think here. I mean, Shaddoll plays a lot of lights and darks, things like that. Super Poly is just a hell of a card. It's hard to say not to play Super Poly at 3 when you're playing a fusion deck and almost half of the meta is targets for Super Poly. On top of that, it can't be stopped. It's a quick play spell, and its uneffect can't be negated. So it's just one of those cards that's just incredibly strong, and if you can play it, you should. Not all decks really support it, but I feel like this deck supports it pretty well. The other thing to consider is decks like Bird Up. You can... I don't have Gardala in this deck right now, but I would put it in the side deck. And then what you can do is summon Gardala to your opponent's side of the field, Super Poly away Gardala into your Raijin or something like that. Or you could Super Poly away into your Raijin using your opponent's monster without even using Gardala. So these are all the kinds of things you need to think about when you're building your deck, is what kind of decks do you expect to play? What kind of things do you need to be able to play around? And I think Super Poly is one of those cards that it's just an excellent way to play around a lot of different decks that are out there right now. And it gets you to monsters that you want to see in your extra deck, which is just a plus. So I'll finish up the spells here with some generic spells. We have one Foolish Burial. Obviously, Shaddolls get their effects being dumped to the graveyard, so you want to play the Foolish Burial to get their effects. It's just an extra way to activate those effects and get stuff going. It's essentially a free searcher as far as the effects are concerned. We play one Terraforming. This gets us obviously into Magical Meltdown, and then into Alistair, and then into Invocation. So it's just another way to get into your Invoked engine, which is insane. We play one Call by the Grave because we don't want to get hand trapped. The deck can play around hand traps pretty well. There's a lot of ways to get into your main plays and get into your main board. But on top of that, Call by the Grave can also impact a lot of decks that are playing graveyard effects and things like that, where they're trying to special summon back from the deck. Actually, I was playing against somebody, I think it might have been Ghost, actually, when he was testing out a Dragon Link build, and I called by his Rocket Tracer out of the graveyard, which kind of caught him off guard. He didn't expect me to do that, obviously, because everybody plays Called by as hand trap protection, and I used it to stop his play instead. But what that did was, not only could he not revive that specific copy of Rocket Tracer from the graveyard because it gets banished, but also any other Rocket Tracers that he were to summon lose their effect to send a card from the field to the graveyard and then search for more cards. So it really screwed up some of his plays and his ability to search through his deck for dragons. So just keep that in mind. Called by is not just hand trap protection. That's mostly why it's played, but keep in mind that it's pretty good in general. And the last two generic spells I play is I play 2 Cosmic Cyclone right now. Obviously, if you want to play something else, you want to play more hand traps or whatever, you could side these out and side them in later. I put them in here as your generic spell and trap removal. Obviously chose Cosmic Cyclone because Eldritch is still running around and they like to be in the graveyard. So banishing them is better. And it's quick play. So I choose Cosmic Cyclone, and I main deck 2 of them. If I'm not playing a back row deck or something like that, I can always side it out for something, games 2 and 3. But I'd rather have it in there and have the option. Know there's something in my deck as I'm making my plays and I'm going through my deck. Because this is a control deck, you're going to go through at least, probably half of your deck, making your plays and playing out different turns. You're not going to just blow through your whole deck searching for specific cards and not get to these. So if you're playing a back row deck and grind your game, you'll see them and you'll want to see them. And the last part of the main deck is the hand trap lineup. Obviously these are flexible. I think I picked the best ones for the meta right now, but they're definitely flexible as far as what can come in and out. If you're preparing for specific decks at locals. I was just watching a video on YouTube that was just like a random It was a random deck profile, somebody who won their locals, but they were talking about how the main person to beat at their locals plays Cyber Dragons. Nobody's talking about Cyber Dragons with respect to the meta. If you watch the YouTube videos, if you watch Simo and Samurai X1 and Kali Effect, nobody's talking about Cyber Dragons. But he knew that he was going to be playing this guy who plays mostly Cyber Dragons and was the person to beat at locals, so he was prepared for that. So my advice to you is always, you know, take the hand traps and the generic spells like these Cosmic Cyclones with a grain of salt. Do your own thinking and your own processing and testing, and be prepared for decks that you think you're going to see at locals. Ask people to play against you with the decks that you're going to play against at locals or in upcoming tournaments, so that way you know your deck is ready to face those decks, and that you're not just throwing in whatever I tell you to throw in, because that doesn't usually work out very well. But anyway, so what I'm playing right now is 2 Phantasme, good against Dragon Link, good against other stuff too, but it's a good hand. It's a decent hand trap right now. I think a lot of people are playing it. I like playing it too. Just I had two more spots to make it a 40 card list, so I picked Phantasme. Obviously, if you're playing a lot of combo decks, those can be Nibiru's. I don't think Nibiru is as good right now because so many people are prepared to play around it or prepared to stop it or play through it. Those could be ghost spells. Those could be more spell negation if you know you're going to play a lot of spells. You know, they could be anything. So, like I said, take it with a grain of salt. 3 Lancia and 3 Ash Blossom. I think Lance and Ash Blossom are 2 of the not highest impact, but 2 of the most versatile hand traps right now. I think they hit the most decks. I would say Lancia is a high impact hand trap and Ash Blossom is a low impact hand trap, but they both have a very high amount of use as far as the meta is concerned and the decks you'll be playing. So take that into account too, you know. Ash Blossom might not necessarily stop your opponent in his tracks like Lance or Nibiru might, but it's going to hit the most things and hit the most decks, and there are decks that it will stop. Prank Kids is an example. I'm starting to look into Prank Kids, hopefully get a list to you sometime soon of Prank Kids deck inspired by Pack. Absolutely incredible player. If you haven't checked out his YouTube, check it out. But the single Ash Blossom, depending on what your opening hand is with Pranks, could totally destroy your play. It's just one of those decks that's sensitive to stuff like that. But it also plays around Nibiru. So keep that in mind if you're playing Pranks or you're playing against Pranks. These are the types of things you need to think about and the types of things you need to prepare for as far as what cards to be prepared for. Now we can jump into the extra deck. This is something, as far as the extra deck goes, there's a whole bunch of different issues you can play the extra deck for an Invoked Shaddoll list, and this took some discussion with Ghost until I got happy with where I'm at with this. And actually, I think I ended up with the same exact extra deck as him, because I would play something and something wouldn't get used or would be not very high impact, and then he would say, well, I play this, try this, and this is why I play this other card, so try this. And I think eventually, I ended up at the same place he ended up after testing, which to me means that it's a pretty solid setup. So first, the Shaddoll monsters, we played 2 El Shaddoll Construct. Obviously, absolutely amazing card. Gets you into your plays, searches things, recurs resources. Just a crazy card. 2 Apt Cologne, also a crazy card, great effects. And 2 Winda. Obviously, get that lock on, especially with Schism, if you can get that summoned out on your opponent's turn after making all your plays and getting your damage in and things like that. Winda's a hell of a card, and even has win in the name. So you gotta respect Winda if you're playing against it. You gotta have it on you if you're playing Shaddoll. So the next cards are the Invoked cards. Now, I think there's a little bit in here to discuss because I don't play necessarily what I would consider a normal Invoked lineup, and this was something that I kind of landed on after discussing with Ghost. So I'll talk about what we kind of talked about and what you could kind of do with what I'm going to show you here as well. So, one Raijin, one Purgatrio, one Agoides, which I never know if I pronounced that right, so if I did not, you can yell at me in the comments. One Mechaba, and one Caliga. Now, you might say, why aren't you playing another Mechaba? What if you're in a long game and you need to go into another Mechaba? Everybody goes into Mechaba. Light targets for Mechaba and Construct, etc., etc. I have found that a lot of times I don't there are a lot of times where I don't even go into Mechaba once. It just depends on, obviously, I'll get to this in a second, but you almost always have a light target. But a lot of times the Caliga is a decent turn 1 lock by itself, and it's a little easier to get to. And Mechaba doesn't necessarily help against Dragon Link is going to play right around a single Mechaba. So Mechaba is one of those things that's nice to have if you have nothing else to go into, or if you have that plus some other stuff. If you have that plus some Shaddoll cards and things like that, it'll help you get a good board that way. But Mechaba by itself isn't a lock. So I would rather have the options, especially with the super polys in the deck, of having I have the fire, the wind, the light, and the dark, essentially invoked monsters. So no matter what I'm playing against, like super poly wise, I could potentially go into any of those. And then on top of that, spin that into an Agoides, which will essentially get you into one of your win conditions. The other important thing to remember here is that prolonged game that I've been talking about. And later in the game, when you're trying to get to a board that's going to win you games and you're trying to outgrind your opponent, is the second Mechaba going to help you? Assuming early in the game you set up a Mechaba or a Caliga or both to lock your opponent out of making their boards, is having the extra Mechaba later, instead of the Raijin or the Purgatrio or the Goides especially, be better? And in my opinion, it's not, because at that point you're trying to then get to the point where you can deal damage. You're trying to get to the point where you can get past your opponent's monsters. And something like Purgatrio is going to help you get there. Something like Agoides is going to help you get there. And especially with Bird Up running around, something like Raijin is going to get you there. So that's how I ended up on this board. I've used every single one of these invoked monsters while playing this deck. Not all in the same duel, obviously, but I think they're just very situational. And I think part of the power of this deck is its ability to adapt to situations. So limiting yourself by playing extra of one card, I don't think helps this deck a lot. But that's just my opinion. If you have something to say about that, feel free to let me know in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. I take criticism okay. Anyways, so I have 4 more cards left that are not invoked and not Shaddoll extra deck monsters. The first of which being Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Obviously the most popular super poly target because it just takes 2 dark monsters. You have lots of dark monsters in your deck. A lot of the best decks running around have lots of dark monsters in them. So Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, I feel like if you're going to play super poly, is a must-have in your deck. I know that there are other super poly targets as well, and I know there are decks. I know there are fusion decks that play things like Borderload Furious Dragon, because it's a dragon and a dark monster or something like that. So you, especially against Dragon Link, Borderload Furious Dragon would be a good super poly target. But you can almost always summon the same thing, summon this Starving Venom Fusion Dragon off the same materials as you would be using for the Borderload Furious Dragon, plus the Venom Dragon comes into plays against other decks, not just Dragon Link. So I prefer to play the Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. And the last 3 cards are the link monsters for the deck. The first being Artemis, the next being Gravity Controller, and the last one being Anaconda. I'm happy to report that I'm not trying to shove Dragoon into this deck. I don't think this deck needs it. I think it actually clogs up the deck and makes it harder to play. But having the Anaconda in this deck is a lifesaver sometimes if you get stuck or if you're nearing the end of the game. You know, you can slap down Anaconda, especially if your opponent has a extra deck monster out. Get out Anaconda, get that Shaddoll fusion into the graveyard, and then special summon some Shaddoll monster using materials from the deck. Just a strong option for a fusion deck. I think almost every fusion deck should play Anaconda. I think that it's just a great option. I don't see why you wouldn't play it. There's room in the extra deck. There's flex in the extra deck to play it. You could flex it out. I'll actually go over a couple other options here in a sec to flex out some of these cards. But I think that these 3 link monsters are the 3 you should play. Obviously, Gravity Controller, one of the best plays is to, get into Construct and then link Construct away out of the extra monster zone into Gravity Controller. And then once Construct hits the grave, you can use Incarnation to banish itself in Construct and flip Aerial and then get back Construct. So you still end up with Construct and you end up with the free Gravity Controller, which is a very good card for a control deck, especially a lot of now with Master Rule 5, since, decks aren't so reliant on the extra monster zone as they used to be. I find that there are a lot of decks that don't even hardly summon monsters to the extra monster zone. Obviously if they have a link monster, a boss link monster or something, they will. But there are a lot of decks where they use links to build their plays and do their combos, and then their final board doesn't really have a link monster in the extra monster zone. They just have synchros and Xyz monsters that they got getting there from links. And if you get out Gravity Controller, it can't be destroyed by those monsters. So, it's just a strong protective card. And as I was saying earlier about light targets, Artemis is your light target. There are a lot of options for linking away cards into Artemis in this deck, and then Artemis can act as your light target, especially with Invocation. You're able to use Alistair out of the graveyard, so you can link away Alistair into Artemis and then activate Invocation and fusion summon into Mechaba. Really, really easy. That's a must-have for this deck. Absolute must-have. Honestly, it's a must-have in a pure Shaddoll build too, because you need light targets for Construct, and there are plenty of Shaddoll monsters that are spellcasters. So definitely spend the $15 or whatever it is for Artemis if you're planning on playing a Shaddoll-based deck or an Invoked-based deck. And that's all I have for the extra deck monsters that I actually play. Let me get these cleaned up here, and we'll get into some of these flex spots that I was talking about before. Some of these flex options that I've been considering. So there's a couple flexible options, a couple things that I didn't show here that you can also incorporate. 2 of those things are in the main deck, and that's the new Shaddoll monsters, Hell Shaddoll Hollow and Nesh Shaddoll Genius, which I'm waiting for in the mail actually. So, I'll digitally impose it here. But these 2 cards are decent. Genius is definitely better. That's why it fetches such a higher price. And I think that you aren't going wrong by playing a single copy of Genius in your Shaddoll build. What Genius does is you send it to the graveyard, and it's I believe it's an effect negation. I think it's just a monster effect negation off the top of my head. I would have to double check that, so you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But so that's pretty strong negation ability, so that way you're a little bit more protected. Hollow is pretty strong, but the reason that it's not really played, and the reason that I don't play it in my build, is because it's a brick. If you draw into it, it's not great. because it's a level 8. Can I count? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Level 9. So you can't summon it unless you're going to summon it off of like Windy or something. I don't know. It's not great. There's a couple plays. I know Cali Effect just did a Shaddoll build video where he talked about he had considered playing Hollow and came up with this combo that used Hollow, but ended up deciding to not play it because the combo wasn't that good in comparison to like a more traditional build. So if you're going to play one of the new Shaddoll monsters, I would suggest playing a single copy of Genius and leaving Hollow out. Obviously in this build that I've been playing so far, before Ghost from the Past even came out, I wasn't playing Genius. And I don't know that you have to play Genius. So if you don't want to pay the $7 or whatever it is for Genius, don't worry about it. Just play the build that I already showed and totally forget about the extra Shaddoll monsters. The other thing I want to talk about are these 3 extra deck monsters that I have gone in and out on. First and foremost, Alistair the Invoker of Madness. Great card for your Invoked engine. Not really necessary. You're going to get all the recursion you're going to need. You're not going, like I said, you play 3 Meltdown, 3 Alistair, and a Terraforming. So that's 6 ways to get into Alistair, plus the 2 Invocation. So it's 8 ways to get into Invocation, essentially. Getting the 2 monsters, because it's 2 monsters with different types and different attributes. So getting to those 2 monsters with different types and different attributes isn't always super easy. Even once you get to there, I don't know that your best move is then to just link away into Alistair to get your Invocation like you normally would be doing. I think your better bet is to use those monsters that aren't Invoked based. You essentially drew into none of your Invoked cards if you're trying to get into this guy. And what's happening is, so you basically have a bunch of either hand traps or you have a bunch of Shaddoll cards, and I think you're better off playing the grindier Shaddoll plays than trying to go into Madness. So that's why I wouldn't actually play this guy. Obviously not terrible to have with your Invoked core, with your Invoked cards, but I don't think that he's necessary. I think that he's just a little extra. 2 other cards, Cross Sheep. Obviously a great card for decks that are playing cards other than Link monsters, because the idea is that it gets effects based off what type of card you're having in the Link arrows. And in this particular case, if you fusion summon, I believe that it's special summon a card. Yeah, special summon 1 level 4 lower monster from your graveyard. You're able to bring cards back and continue comboing and continue fusing off different cards, getting effects, things like that. So Cross Sheep's not a bad card to have in this deck if you can't afford the $40 copy of Credit Plant Anaconda. Not a bad card to throw in there, actually. In place of that, just to have the same, it's still Link 2, still has the same Link arrows, but instead of getting the fusion, which is way better, that's why Anaconda is like a $40 card with Red Eyes fusion and things, but getting the special summon is still pretty good. So Cross Sheep's not a bad one to have in there, so keep that one in mind. The other card is Perplant Dragostapelia. Now the reason for having this one in here is because the targets are 1 fusion monster and 1 dark monster. So it's a pretty good super poly target. If you're running extra deck monsters and you're not using them, and you're finding yourself like not going into them very often, it might be worth it just to put this in instead. So say you're running Invoker Madness and you're not going into it very often and you don't want to replace it with something else, you can replace it with this. This comes in as common, it's pretty cheap. And since you're running a fusion based deck, you end up with fusion monsters and dark monsters a lot. Your opponent has dark monsters, you have 1 dark monster and a fusion monster, something like that. You can think of like Construct, it's a fusion monster but it's a light, so it wouldn't be a target for starting Venom Fusion Dragon, but it would be a target for Predaplant Dragostapelia. So this is actually another good Super Poly target if you're looking for more Super Poly targets in general. So I think if you're going to consider different cards, these three are okay. I would not. The best one is probably Cross Sheep. The next best one is probably Dragostapelia. And I would say that Invoker of Madness is probably your least best option as far as flexing out different spots in your extra deck. I hope this discussion was helpful, guys. I hope you like the deck. Definitely one of my favorite decks to play recently. It's pretty strong. Obviously one of the top contenders in the meta. Really cool artwork, really cool cards, really strong effects. And the thing I like about it too, as well as it being controlled, it takes a lot of skill and practice to like figure out the best way to play things. Ghost was actually helping me a lot with just learning when to activate different effects and when to go into different cards, when to chain different things to kind of prevent your effects from getting messed up by your opponent. And that kind of stuff is something that I feel like practice really helps with, and having somebody pointing out your mistakes really helps because you're not always going to catch your own mistakes. That's why you make them. So I hope this video helped. Hopefully I'll have some EDO Pro gameplay with this build coming up soon, once I get some good film of it. And I hope that you guys all enjoyed the video. Hey ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you liked the Shaddoll Invoked build. I hope that you find it helpful and that maybe you'll check out the deck. It's one of my favorite decks right now. I know it's one of Ghost's favorite deck who helped me build this one. Check out his YouTube channel too if you like this type of content, if you like deck lists and example videos and combos and things. Also, check out some of my future lists. I know that I'm coming out with a Dragon Link list soon, if not before this video. We'll see how that goes. As well as Prank Kids and maybe a Numeron Outlet thing. Obviously not a super high-tech deck, not a meta-relevant deck necessarily, but if you're looking for an easy deck to play and spam your opponent with random stuff, it's fun that way, I guess. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoy it. Like and subscribe to the page, and we'll check you out next time.